welcome back to another show. Today I'm going to talk about the Outlaw Gangster VIP series. This was made in the late 60s in Japan. Obviously this is an arrow set. Very nice set. You get DVDs and you get the Blu-rays. You get all the films, and you also get a booklet with all the information about the actors, the director, all the rest of it, and do you get credits here? Do they show you the credits? Seems not, but here we go. So Tetsuyo Watahari, who was a lead in Tokyo Drifter, stars in this series, and he's joined, I'm trying to find the actress's name, where the hell is, so I can't find the actress's name because she was the best thing in it. I'm terrible about Japanese names, but this is basically it started out as a respectable gangster film and it became a kind of more of a series of films that kind of repeated themselves as they went along. It's a very good series. I really enjoyed this. I enjoyed it way more than I expected. I thought it'd be quite decent, but I did not expect that much from it. But it was wonderful. Strange enough, the more I get into the exploitation areas, the more I enjoyed it, because when it took itself more seriously, it was a bit annoying. But the less serious it took itself, the more fun it became. So it was quite an enjoyable experience just to see it evolve in interesting ways. So it was based in a memoir by a man who was a Yakuza and who left the world and became a novelist and wrote about the Yakuza world and how hard it was to leave the Yakuza world and how damaging it was to the Yakuza. Now, this was made by Toei in the late 60s when they were still doing their... It was still I think it was Nikatsu actually did this one. There's so many studios doing this series of stuff. It was either Toei or Nikatsu. It probably wasn't Nikatsu because he was doing... The actor was from Nikatsu. Wonderful preparation, huh? I was lost. I checked this out and I've forgotten it. Basically, they would do a series of gangster films, and this was just one of them. And it was nicely done, but I mean, there's other series that I will release around at the same time. The Stray Cat Rock series, which came out a bit later, which was more about the youth. Then there was the Female Prisoner Scorpion series, which was wonderful. I think it was superior to the Outlaw Gangster VIP series. Then you had the amazing Battles with Honor Humanity series, which I've covered, and I'm going to cover the other ones fairly soon. This one was kind of the one that it came along, it did well, and it had its run, and it was pretty much done. You know, everyone moved on after that. It was not unique enough, I don't think, to really top scale like Branded to Kill or Tokyo Drifter for like film critics or film fans, but it's still a lot better than the average. So it became a kind of series. It was well thought of, but it wasn't like the greatest thing ever. It's one of those kind of well done, well crafted movie series, but it had a television feel to how they kept on pumping them out. So one would echo the other and echo the other. Even though it was directed well, all the series was directed well, but it wasn't like, it had a repetitive nature to it. But the first one was Outlaw Gangster VIP, and it was followed by Outlaw Gangster VIP 2 before they became their own titles. Outlaw Gangster VIP is about a guy who goes to jail after a scuffle to protect his boss after he injures his enemy. His enemy he already knows, and the whole idea of this is these are two guys who survived post World War II Japan, where everyone was starving to death and people were getting diseases and dying. Like, his entire family died when he was young. He became a criminal early on, and as we catch up with him, he's been a Yakuza for a while with the family. He goes to jail. When he gets back out of jail, he finds his girlfriend is married and moved on, and he has to return to the Yakuza life. And his gang has become a lot less prominent, who are getting bullied by other gangs, and he has to decide what he wants to do with his life. He doesn't really want to stay in the Yakuza because he realises it's a bad life, but he has nothing else he can really do with his life. And as the film goes on, he starts to see his options limited as his gang just start to fragment and fail against this other newer, more brutal gang. He also falls to a woman who he saved earlier on in the film and who falls around and tries to help him. It's played by the lead actress in all the series, who should return all these different characters who all had the names that were very similar to each other, but they were meant to be different people. So they can repeat the romance thing again and again. This is a good film, but it's not a great film. It actually it's got the best reputation of the series, but I think it's a bit long. It kind of goes on and on about all the character stuff and how the Yakuza are awful and are evil, but it only really delivers as a story when it's actually a Yakuza film, where it shows you the consequence of his actions. It shows you him fighting people, when it shows you him brutally injured and how he has to survive. It works when it's a Yakuza film. When it's not, it becomes a bit whiny. When it becomes him thinking about stuff, it becomes a bit whiny. And when you see the other characters, they're going a bit too long, and I just found this one to be a bit, it felt 10 minutes too long, the film. And it's something other films didn't make, it was mistakes other films didn't make in the series, because they cut the pace, they made the pace quicker. And I just thought they were more enjoyable films because they weren't pretentious. These are genre films. That's what they are. That's all we're doing. Enjoy. So the sequel, Outlaw Gangster VIP 2, takes place on the back of the first one. At the end of the first one, he's taken down a gang that was out to get him. That was the problem with taking this film seriously, as he still does all these superhero things of killing tons of people at the end in a big group, and it's like, well, he's meant to be a realistic character, and then suddenly he can do all this cool stuff. It's like, it doesn't really jive together well. So the sequel, he survived it. He's went back and found the girl who he was in love with, who he sent away at the end of the first one. He can't make a living really as our normal member of society, because the money's not good. He has to stay away from Tokyo and all these other areas where he's well known as Goro the assassin, basically. So he has to stay away from those kind of areas. But he's not making money. He loses his job just because of cutbacks. And eventually, to help a friend who's ill, he has to go back into the life and basically work for a guy he doesn't quite trust and help his gang take over this area. So that's the plot, basically. And within that plot, you see him run into this woman who was trying to force in prostitution. He helped her get out, but she was forced into that life anyway. He also has to run into the guy who was a brother of the gangster he killed at the end of the first one. And this guy's trying to kill him. Then eventually they manage to talk it out, and the guy realises, like, what's the point? So this guy actually becomes an ally later on when he realises all the other gangsters are much worse than this guy Goro. The Goro guy is actually decent. He's trying out the life too. So there are nuances. The big thing about these films is that everybody dies. I mean, everybody dies. You see anybody turn up in this film, unless they're played by the lead actor or the lead actress, they're going to die. Or they're going to be brutally injured, or they're going to be absolutely destroyed financially and mentally. They're going to be... It's like the end of Hamlet in every film. It's like, if you see a guy who's a bit sympathetic, who's trying to get out of life, he will die to give the lead gangster a cause to get revenge. If there's any woman who's trying to get out of prostitution, she will die or be severely injured. There's always ending a bloodbath where he takes down the lead gangster of the opposition, the people who wronged him. And these are always great scenes because they always find new ways to do them. So there is a kind of way of doing these films that actually is conventional, but the repetition actually becomes enjoyable because you find a lot in these films that are just wonderful. The repetition actually helps the theme that he cannot escape his life. He is doomed, and he gets more and more depressed as these films go on. And these films are all shot over about a year and a half, and it just builds up the idea that he is never going to escape his life. There's no way, because no matter where he goes, people know him as Gore the Assassin. There's no way to go into a town and actually not be known as this crazy gangster that everyone's scared of. But he keeps trying. That's because the series keeps going on. And this is when it's, for me, the second one of the series actually became what it should be, which was a gangster story with interesting characters throughout the different gangs, which would always vary, even though they're sometimes played by the same actors in different parts. So as an actor could be a villain in one, then play a nice guy in the next one. You know, there's a variety of parts that actors could play, but you can see the same faces show up because it was a stock company, so they kept on using them. But there was a variety of people and how his Gore's story, which was very similar each time, would interact with these other characters who always had certain paths that probably lead, but the actors would give them something different, so you'd always have this sense of this society that was doomed and everyone was on a sinking ship. So it created this interesting feeling of this society that was on its way out, that was going to be utterly brutalised by the Battle Without Honour series, which showed gangsters in a much more brutal way. This is much more romantic, but it still was taking the idea that gangsterism is not a good idea, that the Yakuza was not a good place to be. But this one ended with a really good fight in the sewers where Goro goes after the villain and hunts him through the sewers and slashes through all his men, and it really was a wonderful finale. It was just like, oh, they're taking him to the sewers instantly. That's a nice little metaphor for what's going on. So then it was followed by Outlaw Heartless. Outlaw Heartless was like when they decided to avoid the Outlaw Gangster VIP series number, so it just became the Outlaw series at this point. And Outlaw Heartless is basically, at the start of it, he's sent away his girlfriend, so she's now gone because he knows it's not a life for her. So in this one, he's basically trying to get money off this guy who's in debt to this gang. Turns out the gang had conned the guy and he should not have been attacked. The guy's killed, Gore feels bad and gets the gangster's ill wife out of the area, and he also collects the debt from his employers to give to the woman to help her start a new life. So he's protecting this woman who's ill and she has to stop off this area to the hospital so she can recover. And Gore has to stay with her and keep her safe and get her to her destination. At the same time, runs into an old friend who's doing well, but his friends, gangsters, are out for this money. And he's also dealing with ex-gangsters who are trying to warn their people that Goro's dangerous. And he falls in love with this girl whose father was an ex-gangster, and he tells the girl, don't deal with Goro, your life will be ruined. Played by the same actress who played the leads in the first two. Barely different character. She's the secret weapon of this series because she's called Chiko Matsumura, I think is her name. I cannot remember exactly, but that's it. And if who sees this, you can tell me what her actual name was in the comments. She's great because even though she didn't have that much a great part, she always finds ways in each film to make the part a bit different, even though it's the same part, and give it life and make what is a naive character always seem interesting. And she's wonderful in this. She's wonderful in all the films. She's the highlight of every film. and their romance is quite cute. How Goro's romance is quite cute, and of course all hell breaks loose. Everybody gets brutally murdered. It ends up in this big fight, the same climatic fight in the paint shop, where everyone's covered in paint, and it creates all these weird mix of paint in this weird colouring scheme. It's just unmanageable. It's like, we're going to have this final fight, where did it take place? In there. And you've also nice scenes with the gangster and his pal who's been compromised by Goro coming here. And there's some kind of nice character moments, and the idea of the wife of this pal of his, who's also the sister of the main gangster. And she said, you put this guy into a horrible spot here. To Goro, it's like, you're his pal when you've actually ruined his life. So there's wonderful stuff throughout it. There's nice character moments. It's very enjoyable. There's lots of innocents die. Lots of people are fooled. But again, it shows the gangster life's not a good life. And again, it's very moody. And the weird thing watching this reminded me a lot of Miami Vice. This idea, Miami Vice is the same feeling of, oh, everything's going to go wrong. You're in an existential crisis, an existential hellhole. Everything looks cool and is violent, but you're going to die. And that's what Miami Vice did all the time, and this film did the same thing. There's just this mood. I'm very curious when Michael Mann saw these films and was influenced by them. Okay, now we've got Goro the Assassin. This one is, I'm trying to remember what the plots are in each one, because they do tend to cross over. There is like a sense of the plots going from one to the other. It's like, which one was which? Because each one has a kind of similar plot. This one, he ends up back in jail, and a friend of his who helped him dies in jail, and he has to go and see the sister to say his condolences and also say, why not come and get the body of your brother. Turns out his sister has been forced into prostitution by a life. And it takes him a long time to find his sister, and during this time he gets caught up in this other gangster and everyone recognises him as Goro the Assassin, and he turns out he's trapped in this plot with these people trying to con this girl played by the same actress from the last bunch of films, because she's the daughter of a guy who was killed. And there's lots of machinations and lots of plotting and lots of tragedy and lots of people die. This is probably the best of the series. It's hard to explain why. It's just when you're watching it, you think, yeah, this is the best one. It's got a really good final fight in the Docklands. And all the characters are just enjoyable, and all the others are, he's against these people who are trying to expand, trying to modern, and they're fed up of the older type of Yakuza who have still honour, and those guys are getting forced out and are getting betrayed, and it's just this whole section of gangsters throughout the film that keep it interesting, and Goro's this kind of like wrecking ball through this variety of clans that are fighting each other, which he always does ultimately in these films. He always comes in, and there's usually a couple of different people who are, you know, intrigued by the possibility of having Goro. They cross him, he gets out for revenge, and he ends up destroying them. I mean, it's the same plot basically. Now we go to one of the films that was, it's Black Dagger, which was it's not viewed as the best film. This is one of my favourites though. This is, it starts off with Goro with another girl played by the same actress, and she's killed first thing in the film. And the guy who actually kills her feels remorseful about it because she was a civilian, she got caught up in a fight between him and Goro. Then Goro leaves the area feeling depressed, and he goes to this other area where his old friend of his, Goro's always got an old friend of an old boss who's trying to help out, and the boss or friend always gets bloodily beaten or dies. You know, every so often they don't die, but mostly they die. He goes to meet this friend who and ends up getting a job in his friend's place. His friend moved into gangster life, so he's given him a job. He runs into a girl who just looks like his girlfriend, same actress, but here they're actually playing up the idea, repetitive idea of this character he keeps on seeing. So, is he always seeing the same woman in his head, Does he just view all women as the same, or is that repeating trauma in his head that he can't get around? It creates this sense, this film, of this endless cycle of violence that he cannot escape from. It's like this turning wheel where he will never get out. And this film takes the idea of this gangster who killed a woman early on. He's been feeling very remorseful and he's lost his drive to become the top Yakuza, and his family's trying to push him back into that life, and that's causes tragedy. The guy who was a friend is getting forced out. He runs into an ex-girlfriend, going to an ex-girlfriend and her husband, who are also trying to make do in a life that's full of compromises, and doesn't end well for them either. And again, it ends in a big fight. But it's kind of ambiguous because the lead guy is remorseful and does not want to be in this life, and he gets enforced by these other gangsters around about him to be more ruthless, and there's the sense of Goro's so tired of his life now and he just wants out. So this is one of my favourites. This is a really fun film. I know I'm talking about repetitive, but the plots are repetitive, but the characters aren't, and the visual style always feels like it's changing slightly each time, and with different directors into some of them. And you can always rely on the final fight to be really good as Goro takes them all out. There's always a couple of good fights in between. There's always some nice little bits of business throughout with Goro within other characters. It's always an interesting setup, even though it's a repetitive setup, because the repetition makes the tragedy of this guy's life of never being able to escape fuller, because there's just nowhere to go. There's no way he can escape into civilian life. The final film is called Outlaw Kill. That's the one I remember least, even though there's one that I saw last of this. It's kind of the blandest of the bunch. It follows the same routine. It actually is a film where you feel like they're really not interested in Goro anymore. They're interested in all the other characters around him more than he is, because he seems to disappear for quite a bit of the film, while you go to other characters and let them do their thing, and eventually he comes back into it and kills lots of people. But this is where you get a sense that this series could not go any longer. It was like they'd done everything they could. They'd found all these variations of these characters, of either ex-Yakuza who are trying to move on, or Yakuza still trapped the system and realising it was a futile life, or ex-chiefs that had to move from one gang to another and were ruined, and just a bunch of scenes that were interesting that kept the series going. And this one, it just feels like they've done everything, there's nothing else they can do, and they stopped at one film too late, because if they ended in the fifth one, it would probably be better off for everybody. The sixth one does feel a bit repetitive. It does feel like it's a programmer. No one was that passionate about it. It just feels like, let's get on with it. And the final fight, where Goro finally has a romance with the same actress again and leaves her, and we end up walking through this landscape that's just grey and horrible and just mucky, and it's like he's crawling into his grave at this point. You know, it's like there's nowhere else to go in the series of this character, but it's a nice little metaphor for the end of the series. He's running towards his mud and horribleness. It's just a wonderful series. It is the epitome of a series that just did not evolve at all, but because the theme is he cannot escape this life, the repetition actually worked, and it made every episode feel fuller because there was just never any escape. Now, you could have found clever ways to avoid that formula, but I think it would have made for a lot less fun a series, because you see directors finding new ways around the formula without keeping the idea of this existential angst of never escaping. It's kind of like the Roadrunner and Wile E. Coyote, this repetitive thing of he's never going to get the bird, he's never going to get the bird, and this one it's never going to escape, he's never going to escape, and that creates the tension within the stories, which makes it interesting. But it is a wonderful series. I really enjoyed it. Despite the repetition, I really enjoyed this series. It is worth checking out from Arrow. I think they've re-released these ones. If they have, buy it. It's really worth seeing. It is very enjoyable. Despite what I've said about the repetition, they do keep it interesting. So I hope you enjoyed this. I'll be back soon with some more videos. I'll see you then.